Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. We have a special guest, author and overall multi-talented person, Tom Avatabili, who has a current, hot, very well-received book called Ask Not, which we'll get into in a second. And that dovetails to the other several books he's written, The God Particle, The Eighth Day, among others. Both The God Particle and The Eighth Day I've read and quite good. I haven't gotten to his current book yet, but I know he's gotten some rave reviews. So without further ado, we have Tom Avatabili. Let's talk about your current book, what it's all about, how you came to write it, and some of the really nice reviews on the book itself.
Well, let me say that that was some nice ado that you gave me. But without further ado of that.
Least I can do, Tom. Well deserved.
At least you can ado. Anyway, my new book is kind of a fun ride. It's almost in the classic mode of a murder mystery, police procedural. But the unique thing is it's set against the backdrop of the Kennedy assassination. So you got all this stuff going on with the Kennedy assassination while some guy is trying to figure out a murder mystery. And it's a nice kind of interplay back and forth because the second delivery on the book is scratching that conspiracy theory itch that a lot of people have. There are some people who just love to cozy up with a nice warm conspiracy theory. And if we know nothing about the Kennedy assassination, we know that it supplies us with an endless degree of incredible conspiracy theories. And some of them make you go, and some of them make you go, nah. So between those two polarities is the landscape of my current novel, which is called Ask Not. And then the Ask Not has an exclamation point if you search it, but you can find it easily on Ask Not Book, asknotbook.com. That'll take you right there. But the book has been doing very well because guess what? A lot of people really are interested in the Kennedy thing, even 60 years later. And again, as a backdrop, it brings people to the book. The actual story, when they get there, is very compelling. And the story is one of an airline pilot who has a death in his family, and then all of a sudden, his brother is being accused of double murder by the Texas Rangers. Being an airline pilot, he can jump all kinds of jump seats and jump on planes and crisscross the country, which he does. And in this hopscotching, he's putting together clues to what's going on with his brother, what happened, and he stumbles in to a major JFK conspiracy. All along saying, most conspiracy people are a little weird. I don't know. To me, it's 3 shots to the Warren Commission, and I never think about it again. And all of a sudden, he's confronted with all this myriad facts of all these different crazy and not so crazy conspiracies. So while he's, trying to get to the truth of his story, he's stumbling over all these other aspects. And there's a wonderful woman who comes into his life who helps him out. And she has a certain set of skills that he needed at that point. And then there's the bad guys, the super evil, who are out there and who don't want him to succeed or anyone to succeed with the actual facts of the JFK assassination. And that becomes a whole, kind of super evil that affects him and puts him up against incredible odds. So my hero,
Tom,
Hank Larson, has to figure it out.
Tom, what I really like, when you're, first of all, Tom, can't wait for the movie. But I used to watch a show, I got it on DVD, Foyle's War. It was a PBS. I think it was originally done in England. And the only reason I mention that because it was a whole thing about solving crimes, but it was the backdrop of World War II. So I always found that interesting to have things going on in an overall backdrop of something very historical and something that everyone really knows and has some affinity for.
Bingo. That's exactly the same kind of format of my novel. And one of the interesting things is a lot of the reviews, and they've been great. One of the ones that really caught my eye was somebody said, "Hey, there's a lot of sex in this book," and I'm like, "Really? no idea there was a lot of sex in the book, but when I go back to it, there kind of is because he's an airline pilot and he travels and he
Back
meets
in the
people.
day, yeah, when it had more of its fringe benefits, as they say.
Yeah, and back in the day is correct because the whole book takes place in 1993. So it's not it's not easy to just find answers on computers. A lot of it is shoe leather. A lot of it is you physically have to go and talk to people. There's hardly any cell phones. So 93 gives me a very tactile kind of organic story that isn't short-circuited by a phone call, or I looked it up online or I Googled it. So there's actually more dimension to the story and the story arc that my character, Hank Larson, the airline pilot, has to kind of weave through as he's trying to get to the truth. And the people he meets along the way are various characters, some who don't believe him, some who wish him ill, and some who are trying to help him. So it becomes a kind of root for the good guy kind of book, and that's what I've been getting a lot of comments on.
People are yearning for that. Dr. Lopkin, any questions or thoughts?
Yeah, Tom, I just want to clarify. You said the book was set in 1993. So how does the JFK assassination fit into this?
Because in 1993, it was the 30th anniversary of JFK. But JFK never went away. So when his brother comes up with an artifact from the JFK assassination, all of a sudden, everyone who touches the artifact 30 years later dies. In fact, that one of the main characters in the beginning says, it's been 30 years, nobody cares anymore. And boom, he's dead. Somebody does care. Who? How? Why?
Oh, so they got rubbed out, in other words, some way, somehow.
Yeah, they definitely get invited off the planet for having had any curiosity or had something they thought was, this is definite proof. And what the beauty of the book is that Hank gets a hold of this thing and doesn't know he has it. And he becomes a target. And he's in the crosshairs. He doesn't know it yet. So he's wondering why everybody's after him. And it's that kind of, you got to survive at all costs kind of story that it turns into. And he doesn't know he has it. And nobody even knows what it is at the beginning, so it's even more confusing. But as the story unfolds, we find out what it is, and it is very convincing and can take down the powerful people who orchestrated, in my book, and maybe in reality, the whole JFK assassination.
Interesting. And this is obviously your first book. How many books have you done before this? Quite a number, actually.
This will be my 10th. This will be my 10th published book, and I have 5 #1 bestsellers, and hopefully this one will reach that same level. It's
kind of
it's just a lot of fun. Yeah, you got to do something on the rainy days, so I write books. But the
Dr. Lopkin,
yes,
yep.
Dr. Lopkin, any thoughts?
No, I'm just very interested. It sounds like a great read.
Well, that's what I'm hoping for. That's what I've gotten on the 5 stars.
To seek that out. And Tom, how can they do that?
Well, again, the simple, easy way is to go to Ask Not Book, just those words, .com. And that'll take you right to the place where you can see it and read it and buy it. AskNotBook.com.
Sounds fantastic. Are you going to hang around for our topics in the news that we always do?
I'm sure. I'm game.
All right, good. You're on. Let's talk about one thing that will be near and dear to your heart. Let's talk about the judgment against Trump. What your thoughts are? How, in terms of on him, on New York City, and the whole legitimacy of it. And then the overall thing is, I know New York City's been near and dear to your heart. It seems to me things have kind of been going south. So a lot there, but maybe you can tee it off for us. Let's look at the judgment first against the Donald.
Well, as an author, I'm duty bound to be a left-wing liberal. You know that, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, this could kill my career because, the whole business is controlled by liberals. So I don't like Trump. I said that. Having said that, I think what this one judge is doing will irrevocably harm business in New York. You're starting to see a number of entrepreneur types coming out saying, "Hey, wait a minute, I do this every day." And if you can take almost $1 billion away from this guy when you add up all the different New York things against him, how does that happen? I do this every day. And
a victimless crime, by the way, correct?
Yeah, well, not only a victimless crime, but the banks will still do business with him.
Yeah, they want to do business
whether you like Trump or not.
Dr. Lopkin, sorry. We got Dr. Lopkin.
Yeah, we really shouldn't phrase it that way, a victimless crime, because the fact of the matter is no crime was ever committed. So,
there you go.
So, that's
changes why he's the doctor.
That's
That's a great point. The victim was nothing.
Exactly. Yeah. I've spoken to a number of legal analysts, and from both sides of the aisle, they all agree there's no way this is going to stand up on appeal. But
it still screws him over, Lopkin, because he's got to come up with $350 million. Yeah, the only one can do that is Tom.
Right. Actually, according to the Trump organization, they do have the cash to put in the escrow account while this goes to appeal. But the big loser here isn't going to be Trump, it's going to be New York, because businesses are now looking at it and saying, well, if some rogue judge can just decide they don't like you, if the attorney general of the state can just say, I don't like the way you do business, even though it's perfectly legal and there's no complaints against you, why would we do business in New York? You've already seen businesses leaving New York because of rising crime, which, quite frankly, Letitia James really should have been focusing there. But the idea that a very common practice in real estate is now suddenly being criminalized, you're going to see development drop like a stone. Real estate developers are going to look elsewhere outside of New York because of this verdict. And at this point, I don't know if New York City can withstand the drop in business. Just today, they were talking about the fact this is not New York City, but New York State. Remington Firearms is leaving New York State after over 200 years because of New York's anti-gun legislation. So you've got not just the judicial system, but you've got the legislature passing all sorts of anti-business laws. Businesses are saying, guess what? We're out of here.
But isn't it overall, Dr. Lopkin, and then we get Tom on, that isn't it indicative of blue versus red states? Basically, in my view, whatever it's worth, you have blue states where these people were, college pinheads, never worked a friggin' day in their life, and everything is theoretical. And guess what? It's theoretical disaster as more businesses and people leave blue and go to red. Tom?
Well, I'd just like to add a point that Eric made, which is, if you look at New York right now, every place I worked and every coffee shop I went to for lunch or breakfast is gone, because after COVID, the phenomenon of work from home or remote has taken over. So essentially, right now, New York, I would say, is more ghost town than Big Apple. And if you are doing something like this that would put up a red flag for investment, I mean, you're going to have a major crash with industrial real estate and commercial real estate, because who's going to pay $95 a square foot to have nobody there? And I think that's
a really good point. I think it was a problem. It was a problem to begin with, and now it's inexplicable. that now you're putting fuel on an already raging fire. The unoccupancy rate in New York and other major cities is off the hook and maybe nowhere to return. Correct, Dr. Lopkin?
That's correct. And now there's also another incentive for companies to leave New York because if they have remote workers that are not in New York City or that are not in New York State, even, New York is still collecting income taxes from those remote workers, even though those workers aren't getting any benefits from the city or state. They're not using the infrastructure. They're not coming into the city to support small businesses, but they're still paying New York taxes, which are ridiculously high. So that's giving another reason for businesses to leave because they can leave New York, save all that money that they're paying for real estate, and in essence, give all of their employees raises because their tax rate will go down.
Yeah, and I think New York is contributing to its own demise because of right hand, left hand not knowing or not realizing what's going on. But I totally agree that that there's no overview there. I mean, the Kathy Hochul comes out and she says, essentially, we only did this to Trump, guys. Don't worry, you can keep your business here. You won't get out of Trump. And as many people may love that idea, and it sounds great, the problem is goose gander. The problem is, does anybody believe that? Or does that mean if I start to sound like Trump or look like Trump or do the crazy things Trump does, am I going to be then on your S list? And will I find myself being, by fiat put out of business?
Exactly.
No question about it. Now,
the other problem that Kathy Hochul's comment creates is that it gives Trump the perfect appeal, because if you are doing something in a court of law, laws have to be applied equally, no matter who the defendant is. So when she says, oh, we're just doing this to Trump, it tells the appeals court this was a political prosecution. There was no base in law because we're not chasing anybody else that does this. So that just gives him the perfect appeal.
That's why he's the doctor. Yes, excellent point. Something I didn't think of. Well, Hochul, her only claim to fame is that she's the only one that Cuomo didn't want to harass. So basically, that's about it. She's a real genius. Tom, I have a question.
Sure.
Question for you on the whole overall Trump indictment thing. Where does this go? I mean, a fresh perspective from for Carnivore Radio. Is it going to be too much weight and basically break his back, or is it, as it is now, it seems like it's making him stronger? Where does this go? And do you think I don't think any of these cases really have judicial legs, but do they have political legs?
That's a tough one. So far, I think, to the frustration of many people, every attack against him has bolstered him on his base. And that is a kind of, there was a sci-fi movie years ago. I think it was called Kronos, but it was about this machine that was attacking Earth. And they took off in a 1950s B-52 style bomber and hit atomic bomb on it. And when the smoke cleared, the thing was bigger and stronger than it was before. It had taken the energy of the atomic bomb and just enhanced itself and became more of a menace. And to a certain degree, that sci-fi kind of nature seems to be happening with the attacks on Trump. You would hope, they say if you're going to go after the king, you got to kill him. Okay. And it seems like everything they're trying to do just makes him stronger in the eyes of his base. And what the real worry is, it's in the eyes of the independents, possibly, saying you're persecuting someone. And America loves an underdog. And you're taking a guy who was on the top and certainly not an underdog, and you're making him an underdog. You're making him someone to root for because he's suddenly up against the man. And all those 60 radicals.
And actually, just interject, I believe it's resonating especially in the black male community, that
Yes, it
he
is.
has some like a hero kind of a burgeoning hero following. Correct?
Yeah.
Yes, it
Well,
is.
I believe that's why. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's been picking up in the African American community because there's always been a feel within that community that the odds were stacked against them, that the man was not on their side. And now they're seeing the man attacking Trump. They're starting to identify with him. Now, it's not an overwhelming majority of the African American community that feels this way, but it is a large enough percentage to swing the vote.
And actually, you're just really dovetailing on that. Trump has plans to do rallies at Madison Square Garden and other places in the city. And yesterday, a poll came out. He's only, and I say only, behind by 12 points. Tom, in New York.
Well, I don't know about the poll. I don't. Yeah, in New York, sure. Yeah, that's amazing. I think the other little part about this is that if you need confirmation of that, and I know, it was a while back, but there was a lot of bristling when the term, I forget the exact term. Was it two layers of justice or two?
Yes,
what's the term?
Two tiers of justice. Yes,
two tiers of justice. When two tiers of justice came out, there was a lot of no, that's not it. That's not it, because that belonged in the black area. Okay, two tiers of justice was a cry that people who wanted equity for blacks used, and now they were applying it to Trump. And they came out and just, I mean, they were rabid. No, you can't use that term. You can't use that term. You can't use, we own that term. You can't use that term. But the we wasn't anybody black. The we was the power at B who were saying, you can't use that. We've reserved that term for this group of people. And, that in and of itself is so freaking racist. I can't even begin to explain it.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so no, moving on, I think, but on the same subject area, we look at talking about illegal. Now they have the documents case at Mar-a-Lago with Trump, but then you had Biden. Essentially, well, I don't even know if he even had the same protections because he wasn't president, but hiding the documents in his garage next to his gas guzzling Corvette. But what do you think? I think it was major that they said, yes, there were malfeasance, but he's really not able to testify. That is a pretty low bar. And let me just dovetail that, because they do say his political handlers and the political intelligentsia, if you will, in the media, it's not the right word, but anyway, he said that it's kind of do or die for the State of the Union. I think that's kind of a loaded thing, because you look at that, if he's not able to testify, he's denigrating mentally daily. I don't know if he can pull off a coherent State of the Union. Dr. Lopkin first, and then Tom.
Well, yes, the State of the Union is going to be very important, but
I don't know if he can do it.
I don't think that it's going to really tell us anything, because there's no interaction in the State of the Union. He's getting up there, he's reading a speech, he's walking off. Now,
yeah, but he hasn't been able to do the teleprompter over the last month. I mean, even when he's incapable, he puts his foot in his ass almost all the time. I mean, I got it. It's a low bar, but
most of the gaffes he's made. You have to remember, though, that most of the gaffes he's made, well, he always looks weak. I mean, just walking to Marine One, he looks weak. But you have to remember that the vast majority of the gaffes he's made were not on the teleprompter. They were not on a speech. They were when he was trying to speak extemporaneously. He's not going to do that at the State of the Union. If he's got any faculties left, he's not going to do that. And quite frankly,
do you agree with the point? No, because I want your opinion on this. Do you agree in the point that it can really make him? I don't see the big upside. I'll let you speak. Sorry.
There,
Go ahead.
there is no big upside for him because it's very
Big downside,
easy.
though.
It's very easy to sort of rig the State of the Union. You know, they cancel his appearances for 2 days before. They cancel his appearances for a day and a half after. You know, they give him whatever medication he's on. You know, they can keep him coherent for 2 hours. Um, and again, because he's not going to have to think on the fly, he's not going to have to answer questions, he might be able to look like he can handle it. But it doesn't really tell us anything because it's the fact that he can't handle decisions. He can't handle questions. And that's what, I mean, what's really going to show us if he can do this is if he decides to take the first debate. I think this is going to backfire on him because if they do everything right and they make him look like he's capable, then they've got no way of removing him as a candidate. They're stuck with him. And when he starts making his campaign appearances and starts making those gaffes again, when he has no excuse not to debate if he's actually capable. And that's where it's all going to bite them in the ass.
Excellent points. Tom, your thoughts in terms of what is your belief about the State of the Union? Can it resurrect him? And then also, what is your thoughts about, I think the bar is pretty low in America when you're disqualified because you're mentally not able to testify. So your thoughts.
Well, let's not forget, constitutionally, the president is not mandated to speak. He can submit the State of the Union on brief.
Yes.
Okay. So this might be the time to do that. Well, it may not be a disaster because they could say we can suddenly have what did they come out with last week? Russian satellite killers in orbit, you know?
Yeah.
He's really busy right now. I'm sorry. He'll just do it on brief. There is no constitutional downside to that. And if you have an extenuating circumstance, and God knows you don't have to go very far in the earth right now to find an extenuating circumstance, thanks to a lot of missed decisions and things like that, they could cover it with just on brief. We're gonna submit it on paper, not go for the hoopla.
If he does that, however, it will be a disaster for him. He will lose all of the independence. He will not, because that is signaling that he is not capable of handling the State of the Union.
Yeah, that would be basically a.
That all depends on how big the boogeyman is that he's fighting at that time.
You know, it's basically, I mean, it doesn't matter how big the boogeyman is. This is the image that's going to be presented. It's the same thing, you know, when somebody takes the fifth in a court of law. According to the Constitution, taking the fifth does not mean that you are admitting to any guilt. And the jury is not allowed to insinuate that. However, the image is when somebody takes the fifth, they're trying to hide something, they're guilty, and that's where people's mindset goes. So, yeah, while he's got the rights to, the right to just submit it on paper, from an image point of view, which, I mean, let's face it, that's what elections are based on, it would be a disaster for him.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, Tom, a quick question. Do you think Biden will actually debate Trump? It's probably going to be Trump, whoever the Republican nominee is. Do you think he will debate, or do you think he'll find a way out of it? And what would you advise?
At this point, I'd like to just remind everybody that, as far as I know, he's had 3 brain surgeries. And as far as I know,
how they locate the brain, by the way. Just kidding. Go ahead.
All right. Well, that aside, he's had 3 brain surgeries. So, and he's gone through some trauma in his life, obviously, as we all know. and he has constant trauma around him, whether he acknowledges it or not. So that all that coming together and coming down under pressure on a debate, especially with what's out there, I think the pressure would be too much. I think this, for the same pressure that he couldn't, as the gentleman said, he couldn't appear in court, whether he couched it as him being affable and therefore get no jury to convict. I think you can read between the lines there and say pressure is the issue, and there'll be a lot of personal pressure, there'll be a lot of political pressure, and there'll be his own physical pressure, as you said, in terms of stamina and stuff.
Would you advise him to debate or not?
If it's well, I was going to say if it's Nikki Haley, definitely go after the debate, and he just keep hitting her on abortion and stuff. That's all he can do. If it's Trump, I think he's going to have a challenge, because Trump was a president, and Trump, is going to come at him from, well, why didn't you sign this, or why didn't you press that button, or why didn't you do this or exercise that like I did? And Trump is going to use him to push his own abilities. He's going to say, when I was there, I did this. You didn't do it at all. And it's going to come from a point that is going to be hard for him to refute, at least to the public. If it's Nikki Haley, well, that's the president talking to someone whose highest achievement was, UN, and he can then use that presidential polish against her. I don't think it would stand up against Trump.
I think I understand your point by thinking, and we'll throw out to Lopkin. I don't think, if I was going to advise him, and Lopkin will disagree with me, I think at this point I wouldn't let him debate Carl the cat. That's my cat, by the way. Yes, because I think that you just cut your losses and you just say, if it's going to, it probably will be Trump. Come up with a ready-made excuse that he's an insurrectionist and he's unqualified for the presidency, and we're not going to engage him and prop him up, because yes, there'll be some damage there, but I think it's the only way. Dr. Lopkin, you cannot have him with 60 million people watching him foaming at the mouth. It's not going to go well.
No, I mean, the fact that Joe Biden turned down the Super Bowl interview, which was going to be a softball interview, and he couldn't even handle that. I don't think there's any way he can handle a debate. And quite frankly, I don't even think he could handle Nikki Haley. But there was an interesting conversation about this on The View, of all places, where, let's face it, this is not exactly a right-wing bastion, The View. But
nor a gathering of men's candidates.
But they were talking about the fact that if there is no debate, it sets a bad precedent for U.S. democracy. The debate is key to people seeing the capabilities of the people they're voting for and seeing them in an adversarial situation. Now, that being said, while the ladies of The View said it would be bad not to have a debate, they also seem to agree that Biden would lose any debate that he was participating in, and that would be bad because it would allow Donald Trump to win the presidency, who, of course, they claim is also a threat to democracy.
Catch-22, I believe they call it. Yes, interesting. Tom, what is your view on this? A longtime mega donor, Bill Ackman, a Democrat, basically said that Joe Biden is done. He's handing the election to Donald Trump, and he's beyond the point of no return. Do you believe any of that? Any credence to that? Or do you think it's way too early to tell?
I believe that all politics is ruled by the donor class. That we don't get the opportunity to vote on anybody unless the donor class supports them, backs them, and gives them the fuel, because you're talking about a tremendous amount of money that's necessary. Even in case of a guy who was a billionaire like Trump, a tremendous amount of money is necessary, and they need donors. every ad, every phone campaign, everything is all money out. It's just money, money, money. And when a donor says, "I'm not too sure," that's the death knell. And I think that, quite frankly, I think the governor from Florida experienced that. He said there was no pathway, but I think before he said that, I believe his donor said that and said, "Listen, pal, you're out of fuel." So it's interesting that a mega donor like that would come out and say that. I hadn't heard that. But if that could be a domino effect on donations, and that could scramble the DNC to try and come up with a replacement, somebody that the donor class would back, because without money, they're not going anywhere. Even if you're the president of the United States, I mean, you can get on the airwaves by fiat, but it's not going to be enough. You need all the ground game and all the states and everything else.
Dr. Lopkin, do you agree with the assertion by Ackman, that he's beyond the point of no return? I don't.
I don't know that he's beyond the point of no return. He's getting there, but I mean, even among the donor class, and what Tom said was spot on. The donor class is, the canary in the coal mine. When they abandon a candidate, that's it. It's over. And the donor class has not yet abandoned Biden. But
they're working on it.
If they are going to abandon Biden, they don't have a lot of time. Super Tuesday is only a few weeks away. And if they don't put up another candidate in time for Super Tuesday, there is no way for anybody to get enough delegates to beat Biden at the convention. And contrary to popular belief, the delegates can't simply say, well, you know what? The voters said they want us supporting Biden, but we're going to ignore that. They do have super delegates that can do that. But
I was just going to mention that.
Yeah. But after Super Tuesday, and to a certain point, those delegates can basically only leave Biden if Biden is A, physically incapable of continuing, or B, voluntarily pulls out. Now, at this point, I don't think there's any way that Biden is going to voluntarily pull out. So they would have to prove that he's physically incapable of doing that. Now, they've been telling us all along, oh, no, he's got tremendous energy. He's on the ball. So to suddenly switch tracks and go, oh, no, we got to get rid of him. He can't do this anymore. That's going to send a message too. But if they do something like that, they are basically telling the Democratic voter that your vote doesn't matter to us. Now, there have been signs of that before, when Bernie supporters actually took the DNC to court for rigging the 2016 primaries in favor of Hillary. The case was thrown out because the people bringing the case lacked standing. But before the case was thrown out, the DNC did have to answer. And in their own court filings, they essentially said, it's our primary. We can do whatever we want with it. So they're going to have they're going to have to face some pushback, especially from Democrat-leaning independents, if they're going to just come right out and tell the voter, we don't care what you want.
Now, that would be a huge desperation move. Don't see that happening, but you never know. There was one conspiracy theory of Tom Avitabile, is that Biden accumulates the delegates and then he throws them to Michelle or someone else at the convention, but that will yet to be seen. Lastly,
well, I would like to bring you back to a bit of history, if I may, on this. Barack Obama became president of the United States to everybody else's chagrin that was voting for Hillary back then, because of the superdelegates. The Democratic Party, in some sort of kumbaya moment, empowered these superdelegates because it looked good on paper. but they didn't really expect them to do anything. Okay. And yet they woke up one morning and said, wow, white woman, first black president. Guess what? And they said, hey, we got the power. And they did it. And everybody was shocked. And I was too, because at that time, believe it or not, I was working on the Democratic side. And it blew us all away.
But the reason that was so shocking is because the superdelegates were originally created to stop the Democratic populace from pushing the vast left-wing candidates, because you had Carter, who was a terrible president. You had McGovern that never got any traction with the general public, and they wanted to stop that from happening again. So ironically, Barack Obama was the candidate those superdelegates were created to stop. And they simply stood aside and went, all right, you know what? He's the first black president. You know, if we stop it, we're just going to be called racist. We're going to let it go.
Yeah. Yes. So the point is that they exercise their authority. And I haven't heard anything change in the bylaws. Not that I'm involved as deeply as I was with the Democrats, but I haven't heard anything change in the bylaws that would preclude them from pulling that kind of surprise at the last minute and bringing anybody to the fore, anyone they want. And, you know, there's a couple of candidates out there they could bring to the fore and then trash Joe and make it sound like, come on, you know, we had to do it. And the loyal Democrats will agree. And some of the independents will come along also because of what they call, Trump derangement syndrome. So it wouldn't be, wouldn't be at that, you know.
Tom is absolutely right about there being no changes to the bylaws. They do still have this ability. But again, it's one thing to do it when Obama was running against Hillary. It's another thing to turn against a sitting president. And I think that's what's going to make the difference.
Could very well. That's a very good point. Moving on, and one thing we've talked about this, Tom, a lot in terms of on Carnivore Radio, and even when we were on terrestrial radio, and that is the ever-sinking value of a college education. And I have to mention this because you, and I still remember this years later, were the one who came up with the line, the unintended consequences of an MBA. And supporting that, we have the Harvard faculty group engaging in anti-Semitic rhetoric and publications, further cementing that view. First of all, Tom, this one's for you. I think it's a fast food tagline. But anyway, because of this, in terms of the indoctrination camps, the lack of actual sound education on college campuses, do you agree with the fact that the value of a traditional college degree is not what it used to be?
Well, that's a deep one. I think, look, I've been an advocate for vocational education since I was at Samuel Gompers Vocational Technical High School in 1972 in the Bronx. And the idea that college isn't for everyone. College is vocational as much as being a plumber or anything else. And there are certain trades, and I'll use the term trades and professions, where college is a positive, okay? But there are certain trades and professions where trade school is mandatory. You can't fool around with a torch. You got to know what you're doing. You can't fool around with, wire cutters and things like that. So there are applications in both. The problem with America's higher institutions have been they've become largely babysitters or default positions where people who don't really know what they want to do for a living or haven't been inspired go to kind of arrest that idea until some other time at some point in the future. And because of that, because no one was really watching the litmus or the results pot of what happens in college education has meandered into all those things you hear about, dwarf, midget, uh, uh, literature in the 18th century, from the 16th to the 18th century. You got a degree in that. Okay, where are you going? Nobody knows. And that to me is the result of a lot of money being put to colleges from the government, a lot of no risk for the colleges to go anywhere they want to go without ever being tested, without anybody ever saying, hey, what is this worth? What are you giving? What are you doing here? Okay, it was a blank check, and it's still a blank check to colleges. Yeah, and the reason is because most of your political class comes from those colleges. So they're like feeding their own supply chain. And everybody else who filters through the colleges, you'll call benefiting or being hurt by, depending on which way you look at it, this kind of eminence grise of just what, as long as you sit here long enough and party enough and you fill out enough forms and you check off enough boxes, you're going to get a degree. I don't know what it's worth. You don't know what it's worth.
The average
we don't know what
GPA for Harvard is? A.
No, I don't.
An A for Avitabile. Yes, an A. So, I don't know. Any final thoughts, Dr. Eric Lopkin?
Yeah, I think Tom hit that right on the button. It's like, yes, there are certain professions that, yes, you need a college degree. I don't want a doctor or a lawyer that doesn't have a college degree. However, beyond that, I was talking about this with someone the other day, and we were hard pressed to think of any other jobs. Possibly accounting was the only other one we could come up with, but it was very difficult for us to come up with any other jobs that a college degree is even necessary anymore. And we're seeing this in the corporate sector, where the tech companies have said you don't need a college degree to work here. Walmart has said you don't need a college degree for our management positions. So we're seeing that value drop more and more.
Especially when you see the geniuses heading up these institutions. That was articulated at those congressional hearings. I pretty much wouldn't have those three geniuses run a community college. Let's finish up on something that I find hysterical. A girl genius. She's a columnist, a financial advisor. I don't know if you know this, gentleman. She got ripped off for $50,000. And if she says what she says is true, then she is among the dumbest people I've ever seen. Not directly, but at least on TV. Tom, do you know anything about this?
I've heard about this, and the only question I had was, how do you get $50,000 out of a bank?
Yeah, and the other thing is, who gives? If you're a financial advisor, someone tells you your account has been hacked, so you need to take out $50,000 and hand it to them. I'm maybe not the brightest bulb in the Christmas tree, but Dr. Lopkin, maybe you can help me out. How does that tie to anything that was remotely sane?
Yeah, this was an amazing story. She was actually an advice columnist.
A genius.
And quite frankly, this is the last person I would turn to for advice, because she was told she can't tell anybody about this, not even her husband. Really, what law enforcement person is going to tell you you can't tell anybody, even your husband? There were so many red flags on this that she talked about that she fell for anyway. And this goes back, I say this over and over again, when I get the spam emails from like the Nigerian prince or the...
hello.
I look at these and I go, well, who would fall for this? Well, obviously there are people out there falling for it, and this advice columnist was one of them. Why would you ever hand $50,000 in cash to anybody
in a shoebox
in a shoebox that you didn't know?
Can I ask you gentlemen a question? I need help on this. Is this a career limiting move?
I think so. My feeling is this is a total put up job. I think I don't think
I
this
think
actually
that
happened.
was my next question. I think it's bullshit. I think it's a draw. No one can be that stupid. And
Well, not
people
only
love
that, the CIA
no
cannot
matter
operate.
how stupid you are.
The CIA cannot operate in the continental U.S. by fiat. Okay, so there's no CIA agent that's taking $50,000 from you because some guy
no
from
doubt
Amazon
it's
called
not the
Homeland
CIA.
Security. No,
Right,
she said the CIA.
Right, but that was one of the red flags that should have told her this is not real. You know, there were so many
which
red
is why
flags.
I think she made this up. I think she made this whole thing up to grab headlines. I think she made the whole thing up because she's got a book coming out, maybe, or it was some sort of a master plan that they didn't think out too much. Look, if I'm doing
I have heard that point of view, and I think that's not beyond the realm of possibility because you have to be so dumb. I mean, these things make even no sense. Like a fourth grader would know. Okay, I'm being hacked, so I'm going to give Dr. Lopkin $60,000. Tom.
But having said that, she's in the bubble. She's in the bubble of, she grew up probably with an iPhone in her hand before she had a pencil. Okay, she's a young woman. She lives in a digital world. Okay, and when you're in a digital world, your kishkas are digitally in somebody else's hands. Okay, so it's not outside the realm of possibility that could happen. But I think because of that's her fear, she manifested this story, this plot line that makes no sense for her own aggrandizement.
Maybe it's your next book, Tom.
Yeah, I've already done that. I've already done that. I had the terrorists selling phony art at inflated prices to transfer money
Anything to do with
outside
the
the SWIFT system.
I like Hunter Biden.
No, not at all. Not at all. This
Anyway,
was a mean
Tom
guy.
Avitabile, thank you so much for being on Carnivore Bites. And again, your new book, Ask Not, correct?
Correct. Available at asknotbook.com.
Our growing number of listeners, Dr. Lopkin. So, Tom, how can they buy your book?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked. It's at www.asknotbook. Just all the 3 words you have to know. asknotbook.com, and that'll take you right there.
Tom, thank you so much. Tom Avitabile, Dr. Eric Lopkin. So our listeners can not only access this show, but all our other shows anywhere that podcasts are available. Correct, Dr. Lopkin?
Yes.
Plus, they can comment on our shows, can't they?
Yes, they can. And I just want to toss out one last thing. I want to thank all of our listeners, all of our guests, because this week, the Modern Observer Group, which is the parent company of the Exvadio Podcast Network, kicked off its 15th anniversary. And we would not have been here after 15 years if it weren't for our clients, our listeners, our guests, our partners. So I want to publicly thank Jeff for everything he's done on the podcast. Thank Tom and all of our guests for being here, and thank all of our listeners because we couldn't have gotten here without you. And we always want to hear what you think. So go to exvadio.com/connect. Let us know what you're thinking. And of course, you can always comment at the Facebook Carnivore Radio Facebook page. And of course, you can catch us as well as the rest of the Exvadio Podcast Network at exvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
And thank you, Dr. Lopkin. And before we go, gentlemen, just one more opportunity. I'm sure it's a great book, Tom Avitabile. Ask Not. Again, last time, how can our listeners get your book?
Just go to asknotbook.com, asknotbook.com.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, as always, Dr. Lopkin. We'll be back next week.
We'll see you then.